men and women are created equal. And because they are created equal, all of them are equal before the law. That is the cornerstone of our democracy. America has struggled with this concept. This is not an easy concept. And in times of war and fear, we have not always remained true to this principle. African Americans were oppressed by Jim Crow laws. Japanese were interned during World War II. Chinese, Jews, Native Americans, Latinos, many other ethnic groups were discriminated against. The Pomerades, McCarthyism, COINTELPRO, persecuted ideology. So we know this tension that exists in our society. Behind these failures to treat people equally lies the notion of collective guilt, that we can hold all members of an ethnic, religious, ideological group responsible for the actions of a few members. This notion is false. We reject it over and over again. And yet in times of conflict and fear, this tribal mentality of collective guilt creeps back into our thinking, and we create exceptions to the ideal of equal protection under the law. Since 9/11, the Muslim community in America has been discriminated against for crimes of a small group of Muslim extremists. Muslims are an overwhelmingly peaceful religion. Although there has been no showing that the American Muslim community had anything to do with 9/11, the government has targeted the Muslim community apparently to eliminate those whose religious ideology might suggest sympathy with 9/11 attackers or other attackers. The government calls this pre-emptive prosecution. We call it predatory prosecution, essentially convicting a target of a contrived crime because of the target's associations or ideology. The government's chief weapon in predatory prosecution is a statute that makes it illegal to provide material support to a designated terrorist organization. Under this statute, all supportive contacts are illegal, even those contacts that support legal and beneficial activities of the designated organization, even contacts that try to reduce violence and the potential for terrorist activities. You have to think about that, and other people have commented on it. How extraordinary it is that our government is criminalizing beneficial activities and activities that reduce the possibility of terror. For example, the government charged the leaders of the Holy Land Foundation with material support for terrorism because they built schools and hospitals in Palestine. The government conceded that no money from the charity had gone to terrorism, but convicted the leaders on the theory that their charity had enhanced the prestige of Hamas and other organizations, and thus constituted material support for a terrorist organization. And I see Noor Alashi out there, is the daughter of Hassan Alashi. She's the daughter, father was convicted, spending 65 years in jail for essentially trying to relieve suffering in Palestine. So material support for terrorism laws are essentially thought crimes, ideological persecutions. Many groups throughout the world are engaged in violent conflict to establish their own freedom and independence. Our government lists those groups which it does not like as foreign terrorist organizations, and then anyone who shares similar ideas or supports even non-violent aspects of those groups may be targeted by our government. And Peter's talked about this. The law is so vague that there's no way to know what is criminal and what is not criminal. Even giving clothes to the poor might be criminal if the clothes ended up with a group that the United States does not like. Samuel Larian, Palestinian, he spoke out strongly for Palestinian rights and was targeted by our government because his words were similar in some respects to rights being demanded by Hamas and other organizations. When free speech and ideology are criminalized, to favor only speech and ideology approved by the government, we live under tyranny. There have been hundreds of such predatory prosecutions based on the defendant's ideology and free speech, and many defendants are now serving long prison terms for basically exercising rights guaranteed to other Americans under the Constitution. And I want to point out that one of the things that the Project Salam has been doing is trying to document these cases of preemptive prosecution, and you can see over there we've listed some of the cases. There's about 110 cases there. These are people that we've identified as victims of this predatory prosecution by the government. And if you want more information about those, we've written up the stories of these cases, and you can be found on our website at projectsalam.org. And I have to say that we are already behind the curve. We have to put up at least 2 more of those panels and maybe 4 more panels in order to cover all of the cases. We're just are not able to write them up fast enough. The problem of predatory prosecution does not stop there. Sometimes the government decides to target an individual for conviction, but can't find a crime to convict him with. The target has insufficient contacts with a designated foreign terrorist organization. So in these situations, the government often tries to entrap targets with agent provocateurs. These agents are trained to manipulate people, find their weak spots, offer large sums of money to manufacture crimes. They pursue their targets for years, sometimes posing as friends, sometimes even moving into their houses in order to secretly tape record enough information to manufacture cases of material support. I was involved in a case up in Albany, New York, where the government determined to entrap a Yassine Aref. He was an imam up there, even though they had no basis to charge him with any crime. The government sent an agent provocateur to manufacture a charge that Aref supported a designated terrorist organization, JEM, even though in secretly recorded conversations, Aref constantly said over and over again, "I don't know anything about JEM." Nonetheless, they brought this charge. His only act, the only act for which he was charged, was for witnessing a loan. And Yassine never said anything to indicate that he had any awareness that there was anything illegal about the loan. And I know, because I know him personally, and I know the community up there very well, nobody believed that this man was in any way involved in terrorism. He was a very peaceful, brilliant man. And yet he was convicted. Somehow the government was able to persuade a jury that this man was convicted. At the press conference, after the prosecution, the prosecution was asked if Yassine was a terrorist. The prosecutor replied, this is an exact quote, I love this quote, "We had no evidence of that, but he had the ideology." He went on to explain that if a real terrorist had come along, Aref might have been sympathetic and might have helped him. The sting was to, quote, preempt that possibility, and that's an exact quote from the government. This is a classic description by the government of what preemptive prosecution means to me, to them, and to us also. The government targets for conviction people who have not committed any crime, but who the government claims might be sympathetic to future terrorists. The government is willing to spend almost unlimited sums of money to entrap such people in lies, deceit, and manipulation. After successfully entrapping Aref, the same agent provocateur moved a few miles down the Hudson and entrapped 4 hapless individuals in Newburgh, New York. The Newburgh 4 had no money, no driver's license, no plans, no ability to carry out any terrorist attack. They did not even have an ideology. One had a mental problem, another had drug addiction. The government agents offered them large sums of money to proceed with an attack that was planned, financed, equipped, and carried out entirely by the FBI. It seems clear that the 4 targets were trying to con the government agent for money, at the same time the agent was trying to con the Newburgh 4 for convictions. The only purpose served by such convictions is to increase the irrational fear in the Americans for terrorists, which in turn can be used by the government to justify its wars abroad and its repression of civil rights at home. The FBI's predatory attacks that were first directed at Muslims have now been expanded to include peace activists. Their homes have been ransacked, papers seized, members called before a grand jury to investigate an ideology of peace, I suppose. The FBI used agents to infiltrate the peace groups. It has come down to this. Your new friend at church, your associate in the book club, your fellow workers in political dissent may be FBI agents trying to manipulate you into committing crimes that you never heard of while secretly recording your conversations to be used as evidence against you. We are all Muslims now. Hundreds of individuals have been entrapped by the government in such thought crimes and manufactured charges. As long as Muslims, peace activists, environmentalists, and other ethnic or ideologies can be singled out, targeted, and discriminated against, none of us are safe.